What's up, Digidestins? This is Kyle D, better known as Ridemyavatar, and today I think it's time to really discuss something that I've been actually looking into myself. Is that why is it that these top tier decks aren't always being the top tier in JP format versus English? So let's dive into the video and talk about it. So let's talk about it, shall we? I know that at the end of the day, Japan and English metas are usually a lot more different. And that's because of one thing that holds JP back compared to the English side is that English does best of 3 formats while JP does best of 1. So why is it that the best of 1 format's top tier deck isn't always living up to being the strongest deck in the format when it comes over to English? Well, if you take a look at, let's even go into BT6, Jesmon was one of the top tier decks. And the reason for that was because of the OTK style strategy, it only had to win one game. And sometimes that's just enough for a deck to justify its top contender. Jesmon kept winning and dominating in every format that it was in because you only needed it in Japan because you only needed to do it once. It takes a lot more, it's a lot harder to achieve a win if you gotta do it more than once, especially when Mulligan's not involved, there's no side deck involved, and it becomes down to just having to achieve one win to win the game. So that's huge information because that can feed back into English side, because Jesmon became a title of Brickbond.deck. That was its kind of inheritable title on the English side because it just could not keep pace with everybody else. It couldn't keep pace with decks that could be more consistent than it. The moment consistency played more valued, that one time pulling off that OTK win is not as beneficial as pulling it off 3 times in a row. So decks that had more consistency always sees better play on our side, and decks that are better in the best of 1 format sees higher play on Japanese side. And even with Musketeers wasn't dominating our meta at all. I mean, it was definitely here and there, but the Gabu Bonds was definitely the tier 1 deck of our format. If you remember, Gabu Bonds left and right just kept winning and dominating. Lord Nightmon, even if we take into BT5, we could go back. Lord Nightmon definitely was one of the tier 1 decks. I would call it tier 0. Probably not. I think it was tier 1, but you definitely didn't see Chaos Gallantmon top as much. Shoutmon barely did anything, and that was just because Lord Nightmon, followed by Rookie Rush, followed by Security Control, was all beneficial in the game's longevity, that it just made very interesting dynamics that JP doesn't have. Again, if you look at it, it's decks that can win game 1 very easily, usually takes the tier 1 slot. If you look at BT07 hybrid era, this also plays into account here. These 2 decks definitely were the top tier decks. The reason why yellow purple hybrid hasn't seen much success is that in a longevity tournament, the mirror matches of yellow versus yellow hybrid, you face into the consistency era of the matchup of going into time, because there is no way of, in that mirror match, you're not fast enough. You're both playing the long game and it eats up time, so that easily turns into ties in the format. So whenever yellow and purple hybrid face off, it doesn't really matter because it's usually going to end up in a tie in some way, shape, or form, just because of how that goes. And that's why even with the ban list for us that restricted Mega Digimon Fusion, because Mega Digimon Fusion, when it hit BT, when people started realizing just spam Mega Digimon Fusion with these two decks, they realized that with that ban list, we had to move it over here. And then, yes, blue dominated because it's a very powerful control deck. People enjoy control, but it's like the format is so uninteractive with the tamers, it just didn't matter what you did. You didn't interact enough. I mean, even with Lilith Loop with Eismon, it just didn't apply pressure enough. And you could just say Jesmon was definitely playing in this era with BT7's hybrids and still probably pushing more damage than even these two decks because it was still a best of one format. Instead of having to do it more than once, where time gets eaten up, it becomes whoever wins this game one definitely had the win. And that's why these two decks still dominate. This deck definitely still dominates just because of how powerful it is. I think more hits would have been more pleasure, but yes, it changed a little bit of our perception because these two definitely were the two notorious top picks. But with our side, we had Cherubimon Hybrid that was very interestingly new to our own side because most decks never really did anything with that. You might be wondering what I'm talking about, right? Well, you know, Cherubimon didn't see much play in Japan. I know this, and a lot of other players know this, because it just wasn't a profound pick. It was just, you were on a clock that wasn't fast enough against the other decks. And this deck, even though it's very powerful, didn't always have an answer to those, you know, best of one format style plays. I mean, being able to do something more than once definitely helps out with consistency. The mulligan definitely helped out changing up this deck's weaknesses and stuff like that. Mulligan really definitely helped out, and we definitely intervened the yellow aspect because Cherubimon wasn't actually even playing that in the JP lists. If I even bring up the JP format, BT7, I can type in Cherubi. We'll go purple hybrid. Like, if you look, most of them went strictly for just a core purple list. We splashed in the yellow, which really definitely helped the list out a lot because that just let us extend plays. But it seems like Cherubi wasn't really a fan favorite over there. So it just seemed like it was under the radar, not known what they were doing with it. So it was very interesting to see that. It's just, again, sometimes lists surprise us, especially when, let's even going into the format we're coming into. Predictions are that yellow hybrid is going to dominate, followed by blue-green DNA Digievolution or Jagras, and then Mastamon Jagras is definitely the next contenders here. These three decks will definitely be seeing play. So what's going to happen in this format is going to be quite interesting. We also have restrictions like reinforced memory boost and stuff like that are going to be affecting here. Jesmon's out of the picture basically for this format, so you're not playing against that. So definitely we could see some shift up here, and I really want to see how the shift's going to affect us, because there's not always a chance that, you know, decks like this do pan out like it. Like, I mean, we're definitely predicting these are going to take top slots, but she's definitely with the Rapidmon can definitely see some massive plays come out of this. So it's going to definitely take in some accounts, and we have to see how it plays out. I think we're also going to see some mixtures of different color security control with this, just because they are turning slowly into this OTK format, and it's going to help out. But this could also mean that, like, the Beelzebub Star deck here could definitely see some consistency plays. But again, we have some weird things happening because there is the restrictions on, you know, Savior and the Eismons. But as you can see, most of the decks didn't really even tech in the Eismons that you would see for these lists. So, I mean, there are possibilities and understandings that we could see some variable differences here. I don't think we're going to have the same exact format. Even worst case scenario, we'll have, I think it's going to be following into yellow hybrid and stuff like that. And then it'll follow into maybe, you know, the purple and blue. The thing is, I feel like with no mulligan and no side decking, purple hybrid DNA Digivolve is going to be a really tough climb for this deck. I think the meta's it'll fall into the wayside of similar to Brickmon deck, because it's a lot easier to get this combo off in once and control the board, but doing it 3 times sometimes is really hard. There's just some decks that are just really powerful and you can't keep up with, and it's gonna really test the patience of everybody else. I think there's just gonna be something about certain decks that might prove to show more benefits. I think there's going to be sleepers like every format that once people start looking more into Japanese lists, starts going like, ooh, I could add this, or I can do this, or I can do that. You could definitely see some major changes in these lists and maybe see some major format changes that might surprise and punish your opponent very aggressively. I think we need to take into account that sometimes, like even when BT, 3 basically our 1.5 format, once everyone started picking up security control, that was crazy. That format changed up intensely, and then BT4 just made it more dominant because people are just like, yeah, security control, you don't really have to play. I mean, punish your opponent for playing the game naturally. Well, I'm gonna punish you even more. So it's like, it's gonna be very interesting to see what comes out of these formats, especially this one coming forwards. I think the best of one JP side, it's good to use it as a reference, but sometimes there's not enough value for you to consistently claim that it's best to use them from the get-go. So I think we should take and learn from this and use the information we have and maybe tweak what we have going for us. So what do you guys think of this video? Did you find it very informative? I kind of wanted to talk about it just because I feel like sometimes even going into looking into the JP format, there are just sometimes a lot of changes that our own format changes up to. So guys, remember to like, comment, subscribe, and I'll catch you in the next one. Peace!